speaking and writing all comes from this universal, fundamental expression of nature that comes through us because we are that as well. You know, it's not like we just watch the fire, we are the fire. We are the fire. The Hebrew language and the glyphs that are in the Hebrew language were formed out of the shapes that fire flames make. And that was, you know, developed over God knows how long, people just literally interacting with fire and developing this descriptive language that comes from nature itself. And then, you know, when I started getting into fractal concepts and the holographic nature of reality, it did make sense to me that there should be some, you know, universal expression of nature that we can recognize in pattern. You know, just like we see the Fibonacci sequence in shape, there has to be some sort of pattern that exists that way in the audio world. These glyphs that we talk about not only exist in fire, but they also exist, you know, above our heads in the actual galaxy as expressions of nature.
Oh yeah, I can imagine people sitting around the fire. You know, when it was, you know, before Netflix, we had fire. You know, and we would I would imagine we're processing together around the fire, with darkness all around us, and we're watching the fire intently, and then we're communicating about things that happen, maybe coming up with new words, and also the skies there, right? The stars and the heavens above us.
That's right. Yeah. You know, and it like I said, you know, it's not just limited to one aspect. You know, it's not just audio, it's not just visual. You know, even dance was created out of the imitation of these natural processes, you know, and song comes, the rhythm itself comes from the natural beat of the nature that we're living in. So, you know, this is what I recognized, you know, is that language is much more than just an arbitrary system of describing things. You know, if we really understand language and really choose to use it properly, it is the most powerful tool for creating reality.
And I've heard you say before, well, you have a lot of things to say about language. One thing that you said to me recently that's really stuck with me is how, in our culture, the culture we grew up in, we read from left to right and top to bottom. And that is kind of being, well, it's symbolic to me of something that's being flipped these days.
Absolutely. It's the beginning of our confusion. A good example, I guess, and this is sort of a superficial example, but it's apt. We have words in the English language that sound the same but mean different things. So I can say the word bear, and without context, we have no idea what that means. It has no intrinsic meaning. It's just
Hey,
a symbol.
excuse me just a second. Dan is knocking on the door. I'm gonna let Dan in. Save that space. Dan Greathouse, are you here, brother?
Just for full disclosure, this is our fourth member today. This is Sonny.
All right, Sonny.
Oh,
Hey, Dan.
Hey, it's great to see you guys, man.
You, man, you too. Good to see you.
let's see. You're coming in sideways to me. What a beautiful backdrop you've got there.
You want me to come in right side up?
Me and Michael just jumped right into it. I'm already recording.
We're just a work in progress, right? I mean,
Yeah.
this is certainly progress. I mean, you and Michael and I started this discussion. I know it's been more than a year ago that the three of us did the phone calls.
It was more than 3 years ago.
I love it, man. I'm just hanging out here with the cats, and Eli is somewhere running around in the house. Probably going to come over and scratch my leg in a minute.
What does that mean for you, AIU?
We're not trying to pretend we know something when we don't know something, but at the same time we share what experiences and things we have learned, being willing to even question those things. You know, at first I was kind of nervous about all this kind of stuff. I said, wow, this is going to change the dynamic of our interaction. But I said, no, it doesn't have to. We can just kind of keep, I mean, we've been practiced at this for a long time, talking, giving and taking. So being authentic, being real, intelligence. I thought about that this morning. I go, wow, that really puts me on the spot. And I have to admit, even though I've assessed human intelligence for 25 years in formal, public school settings, university settings, and even for children and preschool age children, that I can't speak with any authority about intelligence. It's like the very definitions of things have to come into question. I have some ideas about what intelligence is. I know that there's a wide range of intelligence and different gifts and different talents that people have. We truly are diverse as a species. What is intelligence? I mean, we have this artificial intelligence that's encroaching upon us. So then let's contrast that with what is authentic intelligence versus artificial intelligence. What makes that different? I think we've got a lot of topics in here, and then the university, defining what is the university. That's, I hate to just kind of regurgitate things that I learned so long ago in the liberal arts program at Eastern New Mexico University. But our British lit teacher was, had us read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And my concept of the university is not an actual physical place, but it's our minds. That's the university. And I'm probably misquoting that book, but that was the impact I got from all those lectures and reading that book and studying British lit, the university. And so we have a university if we say we have one, and we include input and exchange of ideas in a free, safe place.
I like it. I like it a lot. There's a loving respect that we each have for one another. Man, me and Michael just started right off. That was a great kind of maiden voyage moment, I think, when you started. I was like, oh yeah, it's happening, because there was that authentic intelligence that you could tell you were speaking about something that that have been deep meditations for you. And I think that's one thing that happens that's really valuable in this group of three, in this chord of three strands. It's just like, it seems that we're capable of giving one another room to really pour out those lifetime meditations. And that's what I'm hearing from you too, Dan, in your first share there. Yeah, I'm so grateful to be here with both of you.
Yeah, and I think Dan's right on point. This is where it begins for us, is defining these terms, defining exactly what it is that we are saying. And it's all in a name, right? And so, the name for us, this concept of authentic intelligence, I think, is not something that we came up with. It's something that we discovered. And so, it's not really our job to redefine these things per se. It's more our responsibility to acknowledge them for what they are, and to discover the reality of authenticity, and discover the reality of intelligence. We are in a situation where words are used as weapons. And so seemingly just offhanded, words that we use every day, we don't realize the control and the construct that actually creates. If it's true that language is our method of understanding and then relaying that understanding of the world, then language is the beginning of our collective construct. It is this way because we agree it's this way, right? Because we accept the definitions of the reality that we were given. And there are some of us in this world who refuse to accept those definitions, and they develop their own. And it's my opinion and my understanding that the definitions that these types of people develop are not actually their own. They're just discovering these ideas. They're discovering the true nature of them. And so one thing that I'm always very careful about when I'm doing research, or when I'm, approaching a subject, is this idea of confirmation bias. I want to go in with zero information, and I want to discover that information and then attempt to connect the dots if there are any spaces left in between. The dangerous part for me is when I am exposed to some information about a subject, and then when I go into research and study it, I start looking for those things that I heard previously, to confirm that even if it's just a rudimentary or incorrect preliminary understanding, there's still this, human proclivity to just confirmation bias, to find what we're looking for. And so I'm very careful to not look for anything. I'm just trying to look at these subjects for what they are. And so I say all that to say that one of the most valuable things for me is when I come upon, one of these ideas or concepts on my own, and then it's confirmed by further research into what other people have to say about it. And so, that I think that's sort of a unique approach I take. I think most people would dive into the research and figure out what other people say about it, and then go about learning whether or not that's right or wrong for themselves. I tend to study these things on the natural level first, and then dive into what other people have said about them.
So much of
And
what you said just about the learning process. And then I know you, Michael, are really concerned about language, the linguistics, the alphabet that makes up the language that tells the stories. And then what I heard you talking about is your study process and what that's like for you, and how you see other people studying, and how and kind of how you study and how you learn. I love to hear about that stuff.
Yeah, and it's for me, growing up as a young child, my question was consistently why. And I would drill with that question until I either got an answer that was satisfactory, or they told me I don't know. Those were the two endpoints for me. And there were a lot of people who tried to tell me that there was a gray area there, that even though they didn't know, that I should accept what they're saying because generally it's true. And that was always very difficult for me. I could never take people's word for things. Um, and so, this concept of language and the fact that there is a natural expression that's happening in the world, you know, operating on that level when it comes to language gives us a foundation for understanding. Whereas our current uh, education model on language does not give us a fundamental understanding. It gives us arbitrary symbolism. So, when they said to me in grade school, A says ah, I said why.
You've been, and I heard you talking about your inquiry process. You said, I ask until I get a satisfactory answer, or the person that I'm asking says, I don't know. It's like there are two possible outcomes there. And
That's all.
when somebody tells you that this symbol says ah, you say why. Did I hear you?
Right. Whereas I think, the traditional sort of model or what we teach our kids, let's say, is don't ask questions, just learn it, right? Do your best. That's what we call doing your best in school, is just memorize what they're telling you so that when test time comes around, you can regurgitate it. And, I was never really I was never really good at that. I learned to do it to survive in that system, but it was never really my MO. My MO was I want to feel this thing. I want to experience it. I want to be with it and then listen to what you have to say about it, because that will
Mhm.
not only help me understand the subject, but it'll also let me understand you.
Mhm.
And so, I couldn't have articulated all these things as a young man, but that is the
And
way I've operated.
I love that experience. And Are You Experienced? For me, it was Jimi Hendrix and the Are You Experienced album. Mitch Mitchell, Noel Redding, and Jimi Hendrix asking me, Are you experienced? You told a story the other day, Michael, about what it was like for you as a 7, 8-year-old in Sunday school class when you ask questions like, why or how or what? Yeah.
And it's still the answer I get today, which is don't ask questions, just listen to what I'm telling you. And I've applied this everywhere in my life: medicine, law, finance, education, language. It's all this way, you know. And I've had a few interesting jobs in my life, and my question is always why. So when I start a new job, it's like, okay, they're training me and they're like, okay, you do this, then you do this, then you do this. And I say, why? And they say, oh, well, it's just the way we do it.
Right. It's just the way we do it. Yeah.
Me, that is the most unacceptable answer that anyone could give. That shows a complete lack of not only motivation to understand anything, but also just this sort of rampant method of being that we've adopted, especially here in America, which is this is what they say I have to do, so this is what I do.
I called the guy uh, last year. I had a star in my glass in my windshield, and I called this guy, or I called SafeLight, and they sent this guy out. I don't remember his name right now. I actually made a video out of it, but he was talking about, well, he's been fixing things like that for years, and so he's really familiar with the tools and he knows how to problem solve. And then, but he was telling me, having done this for 30 plus years, what it was like working with people who only knew how to run SafeLight's system, right?
Mm.
They just know the tools, and so they don't really know how to problem solve, or so it's a very, he was talking about how, there were people workplace who didn't really have the same problem solving techniques, and that it's just like we're just kind of plugged into a pre-existing system and say, do this. If this happens, do A or B, but you don't really know what you're doing, because you haven't they didn't he's been working with glass for many, many years, and he has this foundational understanding of how to work with glass and how things work like that. So I thought that was um yeah, what you're saying, it's just so true. I think across the board is where, generally it's pretty, I think it's just kind of generally understood now that our education system is basically kind of creating cogs for systems and not true uh, conscious problem solvers, or even just people capable of describing things. And Dan, I mean, you're an educational diagnostician for how
For
many?
25 years. And in chiming in on that, and along with your windshield person that was able to do things as opposed to the newcomers into the business that only knew just the one method. One of the areas that's assessed for human intelligence is the ability to problem solve in a completely novel situation. That's why on formal cognitive measures, those assessment kits are under lock and key. They're not to be displayed public domain. Whenever a student is assessed with an intelligence, they cannot have seen particular subtests ahead of time. It has to be a novel situation in which they have to solve a problem and get to an achieved result. And the ability to navigate new and dynamic situations, which is where we're at with our world and our civilization right now. We are facing things that our predecessors did not face. And especially with this area of communication, I'm completely, I'm sorry I didn't chime in earlier or get in on the conversation earlier, because Michael, the alphabet that's behind you, just these are symbols of sounds, and they also have numerical meanings. And this is like from the Hebrew language.
I would say that, Hebrew is considered one of the foundational languages, right? Where like English was derived and all this. There are others, there are
Right.
other of these original languages, let's call it, but they are all expressions of nature. Yeah, the glyphs themselves.
And see, the thing that I'm taken with is in the beginning, just in our own brains, we have to, if we start talking about intelligence, which is going to be a very daunting task to define. That's going to be a great point of discussion for all three of us. And even if we need to pull in an expert or someone that has even more knowledge about this, but in the very beginning, just inside our own physical structure of the brain, we have to communicate. The neurons have to communicate with each other. They have to have these impulses, the electrical charge, for there to be any communication. And then you have a whole network of these neurons that are firing. They're either firing or not firing at the basic level, is my understanding. Now, there may be some science showing different things in that. But that was just what I was taught. And anything that I share can be brought into question. I'm not so proud or so haughty that, I can't be challenged on anything. But, just that very basic thing, the communication is important. And without that firing just in our own physical brains, we can't even come up with thoughts. And so then there's a firing that happens between us with our verbal abilities, and then the written language even expands our ability to communicate because of the written language, we're able to read texts from our predecessors, whether it's the Pentateuch, or it's the whatever written language there is before us. We're able to glean information, or our own existence can be impacted from people that are no longer even alive, as opposed to like an oral tradition. Well, an oral tradition has a place too, and so the communication is the key for any type of a university setting, and communication is essential for intelligence. And I guess some of the problems that we're facing right now is it authentic? I mean, these are questions we need to ask. Is someone's communicating to me something? Are they being authentic with me? Do they care about me? Or are they trying to? There's a lot of con things that are going on in our world. A lot of confidence. People gain our confidence, and they really have no interest in us. They have just interest in selfish things for themselves, and they will use us or whatever. You know what I mean? Does that kind of make sense, fellas?
Everything you're saying makes sense to me. You used the phrase "in the beginning" earlier, and I love it when that phrase shows up. It reminds me of "in the beginning God created." Also, "in the beginning was the Word, and
Ooh,
with God, and the Word was God." And origin stories, right? And so
wow.
we have this group has an origin story that we can explore, and Michael's already been talking about origins of language. Michael is like, you're like the word guy. You're always like, okay, I studied, I looked this where you're into the word see right now. I mean, I know you're into a lot of words, but this is one you've been sharing with that see.
Yeah, see.
Yeah, and just kind of going back a little bit on what Dan was saying, you know, this idea that we don't know how to discover the answers to things is kind of how we got into this situation, right? We've adopted um, a social way of sharing information that requires what we call experts, or people with these so-called degrees and all of these things, right? When in reality we can look out into the real world and see that most of the successful people are the people that avoided this indoctrination system, right? Either they're dropouts, or they were forced out of the school for some reason, and they ended up just being entrepreneurs and doing their own thing. And for me, this is the value of authenticity versus the value of I don't know the word for it, but it's sort of having all of your value placed in other people's opinions of you, right? And of your information. And so, we see it in the academic field quite a bit. We see how, this idea of peer review, right? So there can be no new ideas if they don't align with the old ideas. So that
Right.
just puts a huge, damper on any kind of real evolution in the fields. And that's just one example, and that's a documented and sort of forced example. We have subtle and just sort of normal ways of being and doing things where we adopt this same practice and we don't even notice it. And this all stems from this idea, from this incorrect idea that we don't have a way to discover these answers for ourselves.
As a creator, as an artist, as somebody who's been trying to, there's this idea that we're going to do something original, like Queen, Freddie Mercury, and that sound, like, who sounds like that? Just sounds like Queen. Rush just sounds like Rush. And there is this thing that we can do where it's like we come up with a sound that hasn't quite been heard before. And also, well, this comes right into this idea of liberals and conservatives to me, right? Conservation, what deserves to be conserved? We know that we can't really learn anything outside of our culture. I mean, we're born into culture, we're born into families, we're born into particular bodies. We're given a certain context as a young person into which everything's going to come. Now, some of us, um, according to Thomas Aquinas, I've been reading a book about him recently, and he says that there are some people who are looking at primal cause instead of the more proximal effects of those causes, right? And I think we all have that common. We're trying to get to the bottom of things. And concerning in the beginning God created, in the beginning was the Word. These are sacred texts, right, that have been passed down. And also, from what I understand, the sacred texts are telling us that there is an internal source, that God is within us, that there is this source of knowledge that is within each of us. And so there's this, and then we're being liberated from this idea, like you're saying, that, well, an expert has to tell me. I worked for 8 years as a licensed physical therapist assistant in the state of New Mexico, right there where you guys are at. And, I was working within a centralized medicinal system, right? So I have to go through these initiation ceremonies, right, where I have to go to the school, I have to get qualified just to participate, just to show up, to be able to put my hands on somebody or to put my heart on somebody and to help somebody through a process. So I have teachers, they teach me. So, and I know, so each of us have been through, we've all listened. Like, we have, is it okay if we talk about the program that we kind of all met in? Are we?
I think we should, without specifically naming it, that we talk about a program, a 12-step recovery program that has 12 steps. I think
Yeah.
that I
So
think that that's fine to
in the
do that.
beginning, there was step one. At step
Right.
one, we arrive at some kind of helplessness, at some kind of unmanageable situation. Like, I have to admit that I'm powerless over something, right? So I love beginning, I love creation stories, and that's this kind of where we're created. And the 12-step program, as far as I understand, is trying to help us. Or there's some kind of, like, well, Bill and Bob, they tapped into something that was liberating in nature, right?
Right.
That they didn't quite create it, but I mean, but they kind of did, right? It was like something.
And they also built it as they flew. They didn't come up with the answer about how to help people except by experience. Whenever they both went to a third person and they kind of said, "Hey, this is what's worked for us. We think we have something that's going to work for you." The two of them got together and exchanged, they communicated, and they accepted that they thought they found something to help in the suffering of their malady. And then they took it to a third person, and then it expanded exponentially. And so with that, I mean, the three of us have this common spiritual kindergarten, so to speak, that we've all come from. And that has been a fertile ground to allow us to spring forth into this university idea, which is just phenomenal. This is going to be the most important thing I'll ever do in my life, connecting with the two of you, and to see what's going to happen from here, and to also know that it's not about me. I'm not going to be the important person. I'm going to be one neuron inside the matrix of all of this thought process that's going to revolutionize the world. I
That's
believe
right.
that.
That's right, man. And I just want to touch on something you said earlier. We were talking about sort of this neuron firing, and how how this process happens. And we're talking about the network that exists in the brain, but we can apply this to the network that we're creating here at AIU, right? So the only thing that causes these synapses and these brain signals to fire or not fire is connection. right?
Uh,
If two brain cells are not connected, that synapse doesn't happen.
Right.
And the way they connect is new ideas, right? When new information is introduced to the brain, there are new neural connections that are formed and new synapse firings that happen. And so what this actually, this whole construct of peer review and this idea that we need to consult with experts literally keeps our brain trapped in a in a in a
Yeah.
in a constructed cycle of thinking, right? There are no new firings, there are no new connections being made. And we use this as language, right? When I say that language expresses itself in nature, we just say these things like, oh, I can't make that connection, meaning I don't understand, right? And it's this idea that we can't make this connection in our brain, to make these firings happen. And so, that's why I say that it's very important that we study these things for ourselves versus listening to people who say they know something about it. I will submit that the Olympic swimmer knows infinitely more about the properties of water than the physicist.
On a much more intimate level.
Yes, he may not have the language that they've developed, so that he can describe it, so that they can peer review it, so that they can approve it. But I guarantee you, when it comes to understanding, that swimmer will, if he were to apply that understanding to, inventing something or coming up with some sort of solution for a problem that involves water or something, he would just completely blow that other guy out of the water. Sorry for the horrible.
On that light, if everything in our history had been peer reviewed, then no one would have ever left Europe and sailed, because the world was flat and you're going to fall off the edge. And we would not be flying because we were told that only birds can fly. If we do the peer review and just listen to, everything should be questioned. It's okay to question. Questioning is good.
well, we're constantly reviewing one another in this process,
Yeah.
right? We're constantly kind of we're well, I don't know what it's like for you guys, but I'm listening to your ideas. Then I have an idea that comes into my mind, which is like context, and I think I'm understanding, and then I try to let go of that idea, and so that we're coming to some kind of understanding about where this conversation is going. So there's some kind of real time peer review going on. But what I think, so there's definitely substance to to reviewing one another, I think. And then there's also, we can't really learn anything that there is something about conservation, right? There is a lineage. There are spiritual lineages. There are educational lineages. We pass things down, and then also we tend to, the way that humans tend to systemize things and institutionalize things, there seems to be something inherently limiting and controlling about that, if I'm listening to what Michael's saying correctly.
Absolutely.
And we have this mutual respect for each other. We stand ready to be corrected, because it's not done in any kind of negative way or demoting kind of way. That's the one thing that I attribute to the background 12-step program that's given us a foundation to respectfully listen to each other.
Two things about that. Two things I wanted to say to complete the thought. One thing was that part of our principles, our shared principles, I think we believe that our recovery, or the ignition of that that true university experience, depends on our unity. So
Yeah.
even if we are opposing, even if we have different thoughts, that there's some kind of unity we must continue. Also, as a songwriter, as a writer, as a creative, I know that to how it's been for me, and I'm sure it's been different for other people, but what it was like for me is I study things that have happened before. Like I listen to music, right? I study music. I learn other people's songs. I've learned lots and lots of, if I'm going to be a composer, I study composition. So that's the conservative element. And then there is this place where, like, I went to music school, and at some point I had to just unlearn just about everything that I learned at music school. At some point I was like, I've got to get out of this place if it's the last thing I ever do. I've got to, I've got to go. And that's my relationship with institutions. Is I move into institutions, and I have this capacity to respect what's going on there. I listen to my teachers, and then at some point, no matter how much I'd like to just kind of join the family and stay, I have to go. For instance, in when I'm working in centralized medicine, I'm a healer, certainly, and I loved working with all of my clients. Like, there was this one-on-one thing that happened between myself and them. Sometimes I saw miracles happen. Sometimes I saw healings happen. And then sometimes I also had to learn what it was like just to not have anything to offer. Because ultimately, in those 8 years, what I learned, all I can really do is empower people to go on their own healing journeys. And I think that's one way I can describe what we're doing here and what happens between us here at Authentic Intelligence University.
Very important, man. When I used to ask the question why and drill, it was because I gained a valuable piece of information by doing that. If I was asking why, and the person eventually got to the point where they were able to say, you know what, I don't know, then that let me know that they had no authenticity about the subject. They had not explored it within themselves. So they didn't have that answer for me.
Right.
If they got to the other side, which is, because this book says this, or, there was an experiment that was done, right? And then these
Okay.
were the results, right? Then I can know, okay, they do have some understanding, but it's not authentic, right? So I could weigh what they gave me against my own spirit. I could weigh their answer against my own, self-exploring understanding of it, and then make a determination whether or not that was true. But without either one of those pieces of information, I could not move forward with that person. If they weren't willing to admit they didn't know, and they also weren't willing to admit that anything they did know about it came from someone else, they couldn't answer me. They had no answer for me. And so that's what I was really doing with this process, was I was drilling to figure out who I was talking to. Because if I'm going to search for answers, I want to make sure that I'm looking in a place that's coming from nature, right? That's coming from reality, that's not coming from a book and if it is coming from that book, that's cool. I'll take that, but let me weigh it now against nature, right? Let me weigh it against reality and
Uh-huh.
see if it does fit.
Along
And
the lines of swimming, it's like, yeah, I used to say this about music. You don't jump, you don't talk about swimming to learn how to swim. You must jump in the water, and it's just like that with music. And I think what you're talking about too is you're talking about really establishing relationships. This is how I gauge who I need to be in a relationship with. What the reason I'm talking with you guys both right now is because even in the push and pull of this relationship, you guys have an understanding of how that works, right? And so there's because really, as far as I understand, we're trying to tap in, or we know that we can tap into an intelligence that's greater than ourselves, right? There's a synergy happen here. That it's greater than just the sum of our parts.
absolutely.
There is a premise that I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think we all kind of accept the premise that there is an intelligence that's greater than ourselves individually.
Yes, I acknowledge there is something that is beyond description. It's ineffable. As soon as I try to describe it, it is beyond my language. Like the Tao that can be named is not the Tao at all. And then even like there's this idea of Christ being the Word of God, and yet somehow for 2,000 years we've been doing some really, really strange and terrible, hurtful, hateful things in the name of Jesus, oftentimes, right? Which is that kind of touches on our idea of institutionalizing the truth.
Right. So it's good to have a healthy skepticism and question things.
It
It's
seems
very good. It seems to be
part of the
healthy.
God experience.
And more importantly,
Right.
to not stop, right? To not stop that process until you get an answer, because language is a perfect example of how we just accept these things without questioning, right? A says because they said so, right?
Right.
There is no intrinsic natural process that says A says right? It's an arbitrary decision that someone made and then decided that that was good for everybody. And then now we're in a situation where we're speaking codes, we're speaking language, and we have no clue what we're talking about.
So how? So we've made we've all agreed many times already during this conversation that means
Yeah.
I mean, because we all read from top down and left to right too, and yet somehow we're kind of, but we're still questioning all of that.
Right.
Yes.
And so I want to
Because
kind of
not everybody does, right?
yeah, and I want to kind of give an example for us to look at to see how they use language to flip reality on us, right?
Okay.
We mentioned earlier, this it's a phenomenon, this liberal conservative
Yeah.
battle, let's say, right? It's a phenomenon. It's not a unique phenomenon, but it's a phenomenon that's happening in our country for sure. And it's so interesting to me because they call themselves these terms. They call themselves liberals and they call themselves conservatives.
I was going to ask you who they were, and so in this situation, you're saying they are the people who call themselves liberals, the people who call themselves conservatives, the people who call themselves Christians, the people who call themselves Jewish, the people who call themselves Muslims, the people who call themselves whatever,
Atheists.
red
The
church,
peop-
church,
And it's
future.
the people that, not only accept the definitions that were given to them without questioning them, but now they turn and take those definitions and then use them as at least presentation tools, if not weapons against others, right? And so, the word liberal, it comes from the word liber, right? The Latin term, which means to be free.
Huh?
But they tell you all the time what you can't do, right? So their name means freedom, but their behavior is flipped, left and right, upside down.
Okay.
Then you have conservatives.
Okay.
Now, the root word of that is serve.
Oh.
And the prefix con means together.
Serve together.
And they refuse to work together with anybody other than themselves, right? So these are the ways that they sort of use language to present something that in reality is not conservative, but they
Yes.
will label it as conservative and use that flipping technology to make us believe that they are conservatives, right? This is what they do with language in general. This is what the DSM in psychology is all about. This labeling process.
Huh.
It starts in school. I see it with my young boys. They're in kindergarten and second grade, and they are being conditioned. They're being told, when you see this, it means this. They are
And they
not
just want you to
given,
memorize. Just
they're,
memorize.
they're not given questions, right? They're not shown a balloon and said, what does this mean to you? Right? They're saying, this is a balloon. And because everybody says it's a balloon, if you say it's anything other than a balloon, you're wrong.
And then back to this dichotomy of liberal and conservative, it on the most extremes, there's no longer any communication going on. And I can't speak as a neurologist. This is not my place or area of expertise, but I would assume once communication ceases between neurons in the brains, then you, in your brain, actual physical brain, then you are going to have a pathology or a sickness or dementia and I stand to be corrected by a neurologist on that. But if there's not a communication between neurons, that there can be no good come from that. And so that's the great break. We have the Led Zeppelin song, Communication Breakdown. We have a huge communication breakdown going on all around the world. Isn't it ironic? We have the greatest means of communicating now. I mean, look, the three of us, we're not even geographically in the same place, and yet we're here together.
And that's what censorship is all about. You know, when they want to censor the words that people say, it's to stop the connection between people so that the neural network of America does not fire that way, so that the neural network of America does not create new connections and new ideas. It only continues thinking in the same paths that it's conditioned to do. And I gotta ask forgiveness for pointing out all these problems. I don't like being on this tip, but I do feel that it's necessary that if we're gonna
Okay.
develop a solution to a problem, that we fully understand the problem.
Ooh, I agree.
As a teacher, I try to identify fundamentals. And fundamentally, this is one of the teachings that I've been just bringing forth consistently over the last years. Very simple. Um, each of us needs to embody a full measure of the conservative and the that deserve to be conserved, right? How can we serve together in what already is, right? In what already exists? How can we kind of say, yeah, that's because we're standing on the shoulders of giants. I mean, we're standing on. I mean, the human species, as far as I understand, was a very, to your point, Dan. Like we know how to solve novel problems, right? When it gets cold, when an ice age comes, we're like, whoa, this is hard, but we can do this. And I don't know. There's a lot up in the air about what human history was. I'm trying to say. I mean, I've studied a lot, and a lot of what I've studied now, people are going, I don't think quite that way. And so I'm not nailing anything down there, but I'm just speaking of what conservation is like, and then I'm speaking of what liberation is like. Right? Christ for me was the Yeshua, the one we call Jesus. Right? I believe he was born into a system. Right? He like studied in a system. He's conserving the system. He's using the stories, and he has an understanding of the people that he's born into. And then he's also saying, hey, we must be liberated here. Leviticus says, don't drink blood. God says in Leviticus, don't drink blood, don't touch the flesh of even your dead relatives. And Jesus comes saying, go ahead, drink my blood, eat my flesh. So he's directly the language of the Son of God. That's part of what Son of Godness is that it's a full measure of the liberator and the conservative. So this is as far as you're talking about addressing particular issues. I think this is fundamental in nature, and I think it's fundamental in our learning process because we have to acknowledge our teachers, the shoulders of the giants on which we stand, right? And then we also have to be fully committed, fully abandoned to the liberation process also. And I would even say that we can't truly be liberated until we're loving and acknowledging our ancestors. And I believe that we honor our ancestors, that we honor our parents by getting free from the bondage that our parents were born into. And sometimes that may look like conflict. And as far as recovery process, this is one thing I've learned over the past years is that one way that I can honor my ancestors is by getting free from what my ancestors were in bondage to, even when and if that offends them sometimes.
I agree. That resounds with me.
Yeah, and when we think about words and language and how it affects, who we are and how we live, the written word was the first recording, right? Like we have video now, and we can take a picture to document something that actually happened in reality. Before the written word, there was no way to record anything. You just talked about it, right? You told your friends about it, you told your family about it. They asked you what happened yesterday, what's going to happen tomorrow. That was the only way. There was no way to record that, to capture an idea, to be able to distribute it to other people. The written word was developed just for this, to solve this problem, which was I have an idea, but if people aren't here to hear me, then they never get to see the idea. So we developed this method of recording things. And it was done with the intent of prosperity, or excuse me, posterity, and keeping an accurate record of things so that we could pass this down to future generations and maybe give them a little head start, a little understanding that we didn't have when we were at that age. Well, that's great, but the problem with that is that it can be changed, right? The written word can be altered so that the person in the future reading it doesn't get the original information. So that worked for a while as long as people were relatively honest, but then after a while, misinformation took that whole thing over. Now we're experiencing the same thing with images and video. Those used to be the record of things. We would say to people, no pic, then it didn't happen, right? And so now with AI and these technologies that are coming out, we can't trust pictures and videos anymore. It's just like the written word can be corrupted. Now these records can be corrupted. And so this really points out the necessity of decentralization. This points out the dire need for humanity to have an informational system that is not centralized, where someone is arbitrarily telling you this is what this means, this is what happened on this date, all of this. We don't have an immutable record other than, what we would call the Akashic records, the ancestral knowledge that Travis is referring to. And so that, for now, has to be where we seek information, because it is the only immutable record that exists. We can read about history, but we know that history is written by the winners. And we can watch videos, but we know that videos are created and produced by somebody with some agenda, as small as that agenda might be. So developing a decentralized, immutable record is going to be one of the cornerstones of freedom, especially in America, but globally.
Globally, yeah. I mean, I think we're talking about the need for liberation of all humanity, and not with any kind of boundaries. It's. I think that we're talking about something that is so universal that it appeals to people all around the world, no matter what country they're in, no matter what religion, no matter what their walk of faith is, or even if they're atheists or whatever. I mean, we have common problems that we need to come together and solve, and we will not solve these problems as a species. We will not overcome these problems if we cannot clearly communicate with each other.
And we've got to know that we got to know that karma exists, right? That there is a balance in the world, and that balance is it is an equilibrium that exists in nature, right? Nature is always seeking balance, right? Otherwise, it's destroyed. So, when we sort of approach these things, we got to know that there is a base reality that's occurring, and no matter how many how much malicious code we inject into the system and think we're getting away with it, in the end there is a result. It may not be an immediate result, but there is a result over the course of the system and the way it runs. For example, I buy an iPhone, right? I benefit, we benefit, but what about the person who had to make the iPhone, right? What about because we know about these stories that Apple is using, all this illegal labor practices and these types of things. And that's not even getting into the mining of the resources. And I mean, I could go on and on with this.
Yeah, there are children in Africa in cobalt mines. I mean, in holes digging that blue mineral out, right?
Yeah, and dying at young ages from exposure. We can go on with this. But they're doing that so that I can be on Zoom here with you today.
Right.
Is there going to be a karmic response from nature for that? Will I pay for that? And
Wow.
so these are the things that we don't think about because we don't consider humanity. And I consider this a very American problem.
Right.
I agree with America first because I compare it to the concept of I got to take care of me before I take care of you, right? So I agree with America first. I do not agree with America only. And I
That,
think this is where we've
that-
gotten into a big problem as Americans is we are benefiting ourselves and our house is badass, man. We live in the mansion down the street. But just down the street, there are people that can't even eat, that can't
right.
even live today, you know. And so America first is great, but what will be the karmic response for us not considering the rest of the world in our growth?
That's a good point. What will be the outcome of us living in the wonderful lifestyle we live in whenever there are other people in the world that are suffering the wounds and inflictions and starvation that are brought upon them by the greed of the people that are even above the three of us. They're so high up in the scale that we may never even know their names. I think that many of the people that we see on the networks and everything, they're just like bishops in the game of chess. You know, bishops or knights or rooks. They're not even the inner circle. I mean, there's no telling who's in the inner circle. But I digress. It's like here we are. What's going to be the outcome? If it's like if we keep just let me use this crazy analogy. So we keep flushing the sewage, our sewage down the river. So it goes down the river, and we think of no consequence, and we keep flushing the plastics, down the river, and then it winds up in the ocean. Eventually, there'll be a consequence. They've already discovered, that plastic is in every living organism on the planet Earth. There's some molecule of plastic.
I agree
Absolutely.
in premise on, it is true that in my own life, if I do not take care of what's going on right here, then I can't really be of any assistance or help to anyone. And then also in the using of a term like America First, like that has contemporary connections, right? When you have an icon of American culture, who those two words become like a political agenda, then you have to if you use that phrase, then you have to kind of like you have to be like Michael and be like, what do you mean? What yeah, like what does that, I mean, because in premise, I mean, like it's kind of like that. It's just cliche at this point. But if you're in an airplane and it's and the oxygen mask comes down, put yours on first, because if you don't have that oxygen, you're not going to be able to help the people. You're not going to be able to help your three children to get their masks on, right? So in premise, yes, and then I mean, I think the question is right. I mean, so then if it is true that must be, I mean, if that's true right here, and if that's true even like in our group, I would say like, hey, us first, like, I mean, we gotta take care of us. And if you're in a small tribe, I mean, the way I understand, even if we can use evolutionary terms to describe the origin of humanity, then like I was told, or I read this, so that's all that this is worth, right? But I read that we competed against one another, not as individuals so much, but groups competing against groups, right? So not that I'm not into Darwinism, but these ways of thinking are embedded in, and so I have to be able to even as I use an example like this, because if I start speaking about evolution, then somebody might be like, oh yeah, or if I use the term America First, then somebody be, oh, I know who you are, right? So it's
Right.
interesting because we can't even use, well, we're talking about words and who owns words. Like for me, one term that's incredibly important is the term non-binary or
Mm.
non-dual or not separate, not two. To me, Christ is my non-binary brother, right? He's the one who said, hey, we are not separate from God. We are not separate from one another. So when I see an agenda attached to a word like that was already sacred to me. And there's people using a word that doesn't, and I don't think it means this, like Inigo Montoya. You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means, from the right, like I'm just like, hold, inconceivable, like, hold on. I don't think that word means what you keep using that word, but I'm not because of your attachment to that word, because it seems like you're using that word to over identify with self, right? That's it just that seems to be perennial wisdom tells me that over identification, using words to over identify with self is not God's ultimate plan, right?
Perfect.
Along the lines, yeah, just if that can set us up. Also, I keep remembering you say, Michael, what about humanity? I keep that phrase.
I love that.
Anyway, that's
Michael, you got to put that on recording about growing up. You've got to. We have to have a video record of that conversation about you growing up and going to church. Yeah, tell us that story.
Well, it is our problem, and it stems from what Travis was discussing, which is this concept that, at first there were a few human beings, there weren't a lot of us. And so we band together and we survived and we come up with cool shit. And then we recognize, oh, wait, there's another group of human beings over there that I didn't know about. And so we connect with them and we're like, hey, what are y'all working on? Oh, that's cool. Look what we can do. And then, now we're competing. Now we're evolving. Over time, we reached a point to where we should be unified, right? We reached a point of population where those individual groupings could have unified into a major group, and that happened in nations and these types of things. But then it stopped. We drew these lines on paper around land and said, "This is America. This is Mexico. This is that," and now we have this glorified tribalism that we're practicing, which is America, or whatever country it is that you espouse as your country. And this it's been taken to the extreme to where we say America first, but we don't mean America first. We mean America only. We mean we're going to do what's best for us, and sorry if it hurts anybody else. It's worth it because we benefit. And so this idea of America first, is only for America. Canada would be saying Canada first, and Africa would be saying, those countries would be saying, their country first. But it can't be done without that constant question of what about humanity? What about the rest of the people? Because there is a karmic balancing that will happen. It's happening right now. The power that America has wielded over the planet for the last, I don't know, however many years, decades, is now being rebalanced. And just like, quote unquote, third world countries didn't like it when we were going around the world and imposing our stuff on them, we're not going to like it when they do it to us.
Right.
And it will happen because no civilization lasts forever. No society lasts forever. They all fall.
That's what they tell us, and that's what the record of history shows us, that even the Roman Empire had its day and it's over.
It's because we live in a cycle. We spoke of in the beginning, and it's like, this is always the beginning. We're always on step one.
That's a good point. We are powerless over whatever it is that happens. We can't stop. We can't stop the cycle any more than we can stop the Earth from revolving around the sun or rotating on its axis.
That's right. And it all comes from this language, this construct of language. What does America mean? Where did that word come from? Why did they pick that word?
That's a good why. That's a good why question.
And if you ask a teacher, they'll say, oh, they named it after Amerigo Vespucci or some guy, but that's not true. It's not true. It's absolutely not true. And so, this is just the way that they use the technology of the written word, and they flip it on us so that we just have no clue what's going on. And more importantly, we don't know what's going on. And then we further the confusion by acting like we know what's going on because we have a piece of paper that says, I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a good way of describing the world that I was born in. Because once you ask enough questions, whether, I mean, this happened for me in centralized medicine, in physical, working in physical therapy. I had so many wonderful teachers, Beb Garcia, Shirley Seaton, Kimberly Starling, David Ireland Hensley, Trevor Talbert, just I mean, I could just name teachers that I had in physical therapy. I could just keep doing it. And then all of the people that I worked with. But then when you start seeing how centralized medicine is corrupted, it's just a corrupted program, right? And one way you can describe that is in terms of insurance companies, right? When you start to understand how insurance companies are dictating what treatments we can and can't have, you realize, oh wow. And then so that's a really understandable way, but then there's a more nuanced way that it's corrupted for me. Like we're like, yes, I am trying to answer part of my calling as a healer, and also as a healer, I'm not really equipped to come to this one location in this institution and heal like this day in and day out. Do I love my clients? Yes. Do I love my colleagues? Yes. Do I love the fact that that I get to help people and to be close to people, and I could put my hand on this guy's shoulder today for joint reinforcement, but it's something more than that. What I'm really doing is I'm providing, I'm here for a reason. I'm doing this one-on-one hands-on work, and then but then I have to be legitimized by an institution. Even still, I can't practice that, because now I'm not an institution. So part of what's happening in my life is I'm actualizing as a teacher who has no qualifications, who's not operating under an institution. Although but I have training from many institutions, right? So it does make sense. I mean, I'm not saying F you to all the teachers, right? No, I've said, oh, I love all the teachers. And in fact, so then you come to this place where you realize that even when you're working with these people who are working on, relatively high levels in their field, they've had to kind of blind themselves to the limitations of their own institution, where you come to, even when you're working with people who are working really well, they come to this place where it's like, well, we don't really know why we do that. It just is. And that's just kind of go along. And then that's just kind of how it works. Like, for instance, if you're working in a nursing home, in physical therapy, you might come to understand that the physical, they call it the cash cow of that nursing home, right? Because they're milking every Social Security dollar that they can out of every eligible member. Why does Miss So-and-so need 96 minutes of physical therapy today? Because I don't think that she really, well, just don't, because she does. Because
it says right here, right? It's written.
Tell you exactly, because of the way this is set up. You have to kind of, because people can't be honest, because now the system that we're working in, I think we're all familiar with this, the system that we're working in is actually requiring us to compromise our integrity. And so you learn how to work within those systems. You learn how to document correctly so that you can be a human. What about humanity? Now I have to dot the T's and cross the I's for the system. And then you have to learn, like, okay, that's this one world, because insurance says I have to do it this way. So I'm going to document it according to how they say, when I really know that even though she needs 96 minutes, and you know what, as a human, I'm going to give every bit of that 96 minutes to this other human. But also I know that if I document it in the real time way, that would not be billable by insurance. And so, it's very important to me now that and so in order to seek first the kingdom of heaven, for me, is about I'm going to have to step away from those systems and those institutions and serve the kingdom first and trust that everything, because now I have to step away from my paid wage earner kind of mentality, right? And that's a big deal. And I think, the Son of God, the Christ, Yeshua, Jesus is the one. I he's he will give you instructions like sell your possessions, give to the poor, that will blow your mind. Like the matrix will start turning into the ones and the zeros around you. You'll start to see that. So, it's like a lifetime practice of kind of following in the way and then seeing where that way leads, receiving all the information and then learning. I did not understand that asking questions, how threatening that was to the teachers that I was around. I had to come into a compassion for these people because I realized I'm asking these questions, and this happened. I started to see it very clearly when I was working in centralized medicine. Oh, I didn't mean to be threatening. I'm just naturally asking the questions that are getting to the bottom of the why, the whys that we can't talk about.
Yeah. I think in pictures, man, and while you were saying that, I couldn't imagine, but I couldn't help but imagine just a stockyard, a cattle stockyard. And when I say
Wow.
that language is a construct, this is what I'm talking about. We say, I want to be a healer. And they say, okay, if you want to be a healer, you have to go through this narrow corridor, right? There's a narrow corridor that you, as this aspiring healer, have to go through.
Mm-hmm.
And like in a stockyard, it's very scientific. They don't just throw some walls out there and some
Mm-hmm.
fences. And, it's very strategic because they understand the psychology of cows. And
Yes.
so all they have to do is incentivize the first cow. The first cow that moves and starts doing what they want them to do, the other cows will follow because they trust that cow. They
Yes.
trust that first cow to do its own initial survival, analyzation, and then decide if this is a safe thing to do or not. And so that first cow makes a move, and then the rest follow. There are very few cows that break, out of that norm, that decide that they're going to just go out of the corridor or go into a different corridor or just completely break that system. And when they're caught, they're not dealt with, gracefully. They're just put out. And so our reality is an infinite reality. They have taught us that it is not, that there are only certain ways to do things, and getting from point A to point B. If you get 10 people and say, how do you go from here to there? They're going to give you 10 different answers.
Mm.
What they're trying to make us believe is that there's only one right way to do things, and it's their way. And I guess now I have to qualify they, you know.
Yes, as soon as you
Right.
use the word they, earlier
Right.
you said liberals and conservatives, and you defined earlier, yeah.
Yeah, and really, when I say they, I don't know why, but I use the word Zed to describe this concept, and for me, it's an arrogance, it's a narcissism, it's a method of being which says I know and you don't.
It's
And
also a method of control, right, Michael? It's
it is
all a matter of control.
it is the foundation for that, because as soon as they make us believe that they know and we don't, now we are subservient. Now we are dependent because we believe we don't know, that if we want an answer to something, we have to go to them. We have to go to Zed, whether it's the doctor, the teacher, the priest, the financial advisor, the tax man, it doesn't matter. You don't
Professor,
know. Right. And that's the message, is that you don't know. There's no way for you to know. There is no spirituality. There is no connection to the Akashic records. That's all mumbo jumbo. And the only truth to be known is what's in these books, in these recorded words. And you are required to accept these recorded words as if they are unchanged.
Right, like in the beginning was the word, because we read it.
And we talked, the other day about, asking this question of, why do you believe the Bible is the word of God? 9 times out of 10, The answer will be because the book says so. It's this circular reasoning, and they really they base not only their belief in the Bible on this, but their entire life, their entire morality, their entire mode of being is based on something that they believe is true that they cannot ever confirm.
So they being like a non-player character, someone who is just fully in acceptance of the programming they've received in the system. Dan, you have, how many years did you say diagnostic? You're like an educator.
Educational diagnostician for 25 years in the public schools.
You've been assessing intelligence. Is that a correct way to say that?
Right, for 25 years with just formal measures as they're accepted in the United States,
Okay.
or in English speaking countries, along with nonverbal assessment of intelligence too. There were assessment tools that could be utilized for students and individuals who were nonverbal.
Interesting.
There were ways to assess intelligence.
And so that's what we're really getting to now, guys, is what is authenticity? When I say they, uh, I would say that they are not authentic. And
Yeah.
intelligence is not something, for example, if I go to a class and I learn something new, that instructor did not impart any intelligence to me. What that instructor did was allowed me to be in a space where I could discover that intelligence for myself, right? And I'm saying this because as instructors, this is going to be our true challenge, is cultivating the environment, not only in AIU as a digital and possibly even physical space, but within the individual, to create the environment within the individual where they feel safe to explore these ideas and come up with the authentic understanding that exists already inside them. Intelligence exists. It's not something that we create. It's not something that we do or anything like that. Intelligence exists. We exist because intelligence exists, right?
Right.
Each cell has an infinite intelligence. Each cell in our body is a universe unto itself. Every process that the human body does, the cell does. So it is a microcosm. And then we can take it down to the atom, and we can even take it up out into anything we can find in the universe.
And
This
we
is,
could take that out even socially
and
to
we can apply it to, yes, to any
all of
other.
all of the people around us in our immediate communities in whatever geographical, geopolitical boundaries, whatever.
That's right. And so intelligence isn't to be passed around. Intelligence is to be discovered by the individual, you know. And through that process, I'm sure you guys are familiar with the 100th monkey experiment from back in the day.
Tell
No,
us,
go ahead and re-enlighten me on that.
dude,
Yeah.
like we'd never heard it.
Yeah, and forgive me because I'm not, all too well versed in this. I just understand the idea behind it. But there were a few scientists. They were French scientists back in the day, and they were studying a certain species, a certain group of primates. And they had sort of observed them for a while and sort of understood the way they did things. And one day, one of the primate mothers took a tuber, some kind of potato-like thing, and instead of just feeding her children that day with it, just giving it to them, she took it down to the river and began to wash it off. I guess it was dirty, it had something on it, I don't know. But for whatever reason, this primate decided to wash off this tuber and then feed her children. Well, the other mothers saw this and then began to practice this same new behavior.
Right.
So at the same time, there was another group of scientists studying across the world somewhere, studying a separate set of primates. And in this same time frame, this completely separate, uninformed group of primates began to wash their tubers in water, just like the other group was doing initially as new behavior. And so there is a thread of information that runs between species and between living things. We are being communicated to by the plants, even by the water and the air and everything around us. There is a communication grid that is pure information. And this is where we exist in. We exist in this field of data, in this field of information. Everything that we see is just an expression of that data. And we can call it God, we can call it universal principles. It's just another label that we can apply to this thing. And so I think, what we're really talking about when we talk about intelligence is everything that is being covered up by what we're experiencing in this current reality, right? The intelligence is underneath all of this. And when we talk about unlearning things, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about stripping away the layers of arbitrary meanings that they've put onto us regarding the true reality, the true nature of our existence in this planet. We're not on this planet, man. We're part of the ecosystem. We're no different than the trees that grow out of the ground. We are part of this thing that we call nature.
Dan.
If you don't mind, Travis, before you ask the question, I just want to chime in that there's a great hope here that because the three of us are forming this authentic intelligence university, that perhaps somewhere across the globe, in some other place, there are three other people that are meeting like us today to openly exchange ideas, to agree to disagree, and to question and to discuss what is authentic intelligence and how are we going to all connect. So go ahead with your question. There's a great hope there, Michael, with what you just shared.
Absolutely.
I love it, Dan. I think in a sense we're the primates who get to, we pray that, right? This are coming together. We acknowledge that we are not, this is bigger than us. We are just one cell, as above, so below, in the microcosm and the macrocosm. I want to just ask you to comment on, you've been meditating on what is intelligence for many years, and you've been with these tests in an institution, just like I've worked in centralized medicine. You've been working with kids and assessing intelligence. And so, I mean, I'm just kind of interested in how you might comment on institutionalized intelligences and tests, and then what about, like authentic intelligence.
Well, and then that's a very curious thing, because my measures are highly biased because they're highly English language biased. And it has been proven in courts of law with debates that, it's extremely difficult to come up with a measure that is culture free, culture fair. And especially culture, you know what I mean? There are assessments that are done that will not show the intelligence, or they don't accurately show the intelligence of students that don't come from the same culture. And it's not culture free. There's a bias that's in there, that's has to be really accounted for or acknowledged or noted. But there is, I tell you what, in my 25 years, I've especially been astounded by children in the state of New Mexico. Anyway, we did assessments to qualify students for gifted programs, and we used only students that were 2 standard deviations above the mean. They were significantly above average intelligence, and it was very it was phenomenal to watch some of these students do what they did on some of the assessments that I provided. There's certain sections of assessments that are timed, and I can remember assessing individuals and going, wait a minute, did I set my timer correctly? Or I've been doing it so long that I actually had a stopwatch like used in track field and track events. And I go, wait a minute, did I read that? Did I read that right? Just phenomenal to watch these individuals, or to see the memory abilities of individuals, the ability to just, recall things, just strings and strings of information that you go, wow, how did that kid, I think you probably both have seen these cases, just very rare, but like a child who could tell you all the numbers uh, out to just countless numbers of digits for an extrapolation of the irrational number pi. They go 3.14 and they just rattle them off, like out into the hundreds. I may be saying that incorrectly, but as to specifically how far out there we go. But let's just put it this way: it was enough to cause a jaw to drop. And you go, how'd that kid do that? It's like, how did they memorize that, or how did they know that? How could they generate that? And so intelligence is an extremely important thing to understand in dealing with the human species. And then on the other end, you see individuals that are extremely limited for whatever effect, for whatever cause, whatever etiology, whether it might be Down syndrome, or it might be fetal alcohol syndrome, or drug effect syndrome, or just some kind of organic aberration or something. And then the limitations, of these individuals. And so there's a certain hard wiring that happened within, individuals. And it didn't make them less of a human being. It didn't make, I'm a person to believe in compassion and taking everyone into the lifeboat. No life is less important than another life. I think that life is just an extremely sacred, unique phenomenon. And as far as I know, we can't create life. So it's very sacred. All lives, all lives matter, regardless of intellectual ability. All lives matter. But I've seen the spectrum, from like extremely intelligent to profoundly limited, in some cases incapacitated to even taking care of bodily functions or whatever. So I don't know if I answered your question,
Well,
Travis.
I think you are. I mean, it's certainly. I think kind of the second part of the question, if you could kind of move into that a little further, yes, all lives matter, and so you're in that you were talking about like kind of what it's like to assess in an institution with institutional tests, and
Right.
then, so, like as far as, I mean, do you have anything to add concerning like, I mean, so in that study, because you've done this deep meditation on intelligence, right? I mean, so I think
Right.
that's the reason I'm kind of pushing on this, is because I think it qualifies you. You've been doing a deep lifetime meditation on intelligence, right? Assessing intelligence.
Right.
So then, and I don't want to try to draw anything out of you that's not coming naturally. I
Right. And I won't shine you on. If I don't know something, Travis, I'll say, I really need to look at that further. I really
well,
need to look.
so
Yeah.
I think, just maybe it's just a continuing question of like, I think it's just the one we're talking about, like what after that deep lifetime meditation, what is intelligence? What that just that basic question. And if the answer comes now or if it comes later.
I think it's the ability to navigate the environment
Oh,
successfully.
So and yeah, kind of like back to what you've already said. It's like to solve. In fact, you already did say that solving novel problems.
Right.
That what you said earlier.
Right. And then there's an importance of having enough intelligence to follow things that are provided to you. There is a certain amount of let me just use a crude example. There would be a certain amount of intelligence to be able to learn from your father how to nap a flint to make a spearhead, and as opposed to maybe someone in the organization or the tribe or the gathering that was unable to do that
Yeah,
task. And they might have to be assigned a different task. You
there are
know,
some things. I took a gifted test when I was going into the eighth grade because someone sensed that I had something about me that was intelligent. But I remember that the intelligence test that I took, made me feel really stupid. I knew I knew coming out of that as a 14-year-old kid, I was like, oh, I ain't gifted for sure because that made me feel real dumb, you know. But then I think part of my life process is coming to part, you know, if there's anything I could call self-respect, it's like coming to understand where I am gifted. And then in these last years, really, I've had, um, uh, you know, kind of, I might say an illness or just, I'm kind of, I'm kind of fragile in mind and body in some very important ways that it causes me to not be able to engage right now in a paid wage system. I can't really promise anyone that I can behave in a reliable manner in their paid wage system, right?
Okay.
So I'm really having to focus on what I every day now. I do what I can do, and what I feel that I'm gifted at. Um, you know, writing. You know, I'm gifted here. Like I love playing music. You know, I understand how stringed instruments work. When I started to teach stringed instruments, when I started to teach guitar, I realized, oh, there are things that I was having to teach people that no one ever taught me. I just kind of like it just made sense. I
Very naturally.
managed those things. So, you know, I think part of my intelligence is, I call it, the way I've talked about it in my video creation, is I see the light in you, or maybe namaste, the divine in me acknowledges the divine in you. So
Wow. Wow.
being able to see, you know, that see that what in whatever form that giftedness shows up, being able to see that, being able to acknowledge that, being able to, you know, if there's anything evangelistic about me, it's not going out there and trying to get people to say a certain string of words and then chalking one up for me saying, hey, got another convert. Really, my job is as an evangelist, if I and I don't really call myself that, but I do have that kind of evangelism in me, where I love to go out and meet people, and I want to bring people into a tribe in a sense, or just bring people into some, even if it's just this tribe for this moment, if it's just for 5 minutes, this little tribe that we've got. But it's about seeing the depth, seeing the intelligence in you, and then saying, God, that's beautiful. And then what I find is that if I can do that with somebody, then it changes us. It changes the course of our conversation. If I can say, I see this in you, and then it's like not telling somebody how and what, but saying, am I seeing this right? You taught me some of this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I'm seeing this, or correct me if I'm wrong. Even just repeating back to somebody something that they just said to me, and
Right.
trying to, not making it about me so much, but I've always got to make it about me. It's always, everything I hear is about me. But if I can kind of turn that a little bit and say, yes, this is about me, but correct, you know, like, I think what I'm hearing you say is really important because it's important to me. And my God, you seem so intelligent, which is, I love listening to friends. Like, I love listening to both of you. To me, this is like, this mind is bigger than mine. I'm free from self, as I'm really curious about what you guys are saying. So excited just to sit here. It's almost like my mind's working, except for I'm not bound to the same kind of twists and turns that my mind's always doing. I'm free from the bondage of the small self in this moment. So that's what I'm asking
Wow.
the
I,
question.
I love that.
I
Well,
love to hear from you.
and see, knowing both of you, I would never have to give you guys an intelligence test to tell you that you were gifted in the sense of all of my institutional training, because both of you are. And as a matter of fact, I've always questioned about my ability to even hang with you guys. And it didn't even dawn on me until this morning when we were talking about what we're going to talk about. And so we've talked about some things about authentic, and now we've shifted on to a thing about intelligence. And with that being said, I am not the guru and end all, be all, say all of what intelligence is. And I would want to know what both you and Michael view as intelligence, because this is going to be crucial in our university, especially with we're talking about how we're going to contrast ourselves with artificial intelligence. We need to, as human beings, start. I mean, we're at a really crucial place, fellas. This is a little bit this is a little bit more profound than I ever realized it was going to be. And so I say that with no lighthearted comedy. Uh, in my speech to you when I said this is probably the most important thing I'll ever do in my life. Right here, just Authentic Intelligence University.
It's time to start washing our tubers.
Yep.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. And that's what we're doing, and I said earlier, we wouldn't exist without intelligence, right? So intelligence is life, man. Intelligence, and what I hear Dan saying is that intelligence is about navigating the environment, which is survival.
Right.
This inherent instinctual imperative that we have to not only survive but to to procreate is intelligence. The things that we do that we accept as reality that aren't reality, that's the anti-intel, right? That's the lie. That's the flipping technology that they put on us. And so what we're really talking about is this differentiation between intelligence and knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Intelligence is about evolution. Knowledge is about fitting into a system.
Right.
You could say that intelligence is about fitting into a system as well, because we have a universal evolutionary or at least natural law system that exists, that is solid, that does have unbreakable laws and real cause and effect that we can see and experiment with. But knowledge is uh, is always changing, right? There is no such thing as I know this, right? Like, no, the only way you can know something is when life hits you with it, and then you have to adapt to it, right? Then you know it. Then you can really understand it. That's kind of what I was saying earlier with the swimmer versus the educated physicist. It's like, yeah, the physicist can describe water very well, but the swimmer actually knows it. The swimmer has the intelligence. The physicist has the knowledge. Am I saying that right?
Makes sense to me. I mean,
Except that I'm so into physics too that I don't
I
I
love
really don't
knowledge.
want
Don't
to
get me wrong.
as like, oh, that's not. I mean, I don't know, because I'm so into physics, and also my son is super into fluid dynamics too. So like, I really don't want to exclude the physicists at all.
oh yeah.
But if we apply knowledge without intelligence, we die.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's where we are now. Everybody's proud of their knowledge, but they're not applying any intelligence. And intelligence is about survival. It's about evolution. It's about, adaptation. Intelligence is life. The cell in my body doesn't need to go to university. It knows it is this intelligence.
Yeah, right.
And so, this is the same for us. We are this intelligence, but
Yeah.
we've been told that that intelligence is not valuable, that the only thing that's valuable is the knowledge. And you don't need a degree to express intelligence. But in our current situation, you pretty much need a degree to express knowledge. And
Oh,
so this is the herding process that they're doing with us. Is why I envision it as a stockyard, is because anything that you want to do, anything that you want to explore, they'll give you the knowledge to do that. And that knowledge set is the corridor. It is the walls of that knowledge, and the peer review process, and this whole concept are the walls that we walk through so that we end up where they want us to go.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Yeah. I've
And
got.
so language is our construct. We say intelligence, we don't know what we're talking about.
I agree. It's these are all good questions to ask. I mean, it's kind of like the Socratic method. It's like Socrates. The danger he was to Athens was his questioning, and that's going to be the very tool, the very instruments we need. We need to question everything. We need to
Yes.
question. Don't just accept things as they are. Question. Okay, what is intelligence? What is being authentic? What makes us different from artificial intelligence? What is a university? Where is the university?
Yeah,
Right.
right. Wonderfully said. Yeah.
And you know, the swimmer, when the swimmer jumps into the water, it's because he has a question, right? It's the question that drives us, right? We're not
Uh,
here, we're not here to give answers. We're
right.
No,
here
I don't
to,
think so either. I
I
chime right in with
I,
you,
I got no answer.
Michael.
Yeah.
I
we
chime
have,
right in with you, Michael and Travis. We're not here to indoctrinate people to join our church or to think
Right.
like we think. I think, I believe that all three of us have this intent to wish to cause people to wake up. And I'm very careful to use words and phrases here. Maybe that's not even the right word. We want people to acquire a healthy skepticism of questioning everything that's presented to them. Do not just believe anything that's being presented to you, including my words out of my mouth on this university level.
that's right. We are not here to lead people to the answers. We're here to
No,
lead people to the question.
Ah,
I
that's
love it.
that's very important. Yes, the questions. I think that's well. There's so much more we can say on that very subject. I'm gonna make a statement about. I'm gonna make a statement about intelligence, and it goes something like this. Right? It's like beyond the. It's there's there's intelligence is passed down. There's a guy named Ricky in Wellington, Kansas, who taught me to play cross harp. You know, he just taught me how to bend. And so he passed this down. Without Ricky, without this one-on-one, I had this. I just met. I mean, I only hung out with him a couple of times in my whole life, but he had a great respect for what was already going on in me musically. And then he was like, "Hey man, you have a cross harp?" And I was like, "Oh man!" And it was that one encounter with Ricky that opened up that allows me to just play a little bit. And I'm not a harp player really, but I can play enough to make people smile and to enjoy it myself. And as a teacher, that's what I'm trying to do with anybody who has an instrument is just open a door in a moment, is just share some. If I can help you to just have an experience with your instrument, um, I think that I've done my job. And so along those lines, you know, one of our principles together is that more will be revealed, and perhaps more can be revealed to us through you, because as we expand our as we it's like the three of us, if we're to bring in a fourth member or a fifth member in a moment or whatever, we don't know how that dynamic goes. One thing I love about 12-step meetings is there's an intelligence, a new intelligence. I learned something. I don't even have to agree with what everyone shares. It's almost like you talk about intelligence. I can listen if I give someone my attention, especially if I don't agree with them,
Uh
especially if I don't like them, especially
huh.
if they're providing some kind of, you know, grading experience. If I can hold that space and take some breaths in and, you know, kind of have this acceptance experience, I will, and trust that I'm hearing something from God, from a higher power that that is beyond my conscious capacity to understand. That for me is one way I can use to describe intelligence. I have an endocrine system in my body. I've been told, you know, like, and that it's the regulatory mechanism for all of my hormones. I don't know about it really. I haven't seen it. I mean, but I kind of I do. I do kind of still have some trust for people who've looked inside bodies. And I'm not going to do that. There's a lot of stuff that I'm not going to do. I still trust a lot of things that I've been told and that I've learned. And I use them to describe things. I say, well, this seems, until somebody tells me different, you know, I'll still talk about evolution, anthropology, you know, these things, that these ideas that were given to me as part of my in the beginning stories, right? But you talk about intelligence, like there's I don't really know how to operate my endocrine system. assuming that it's there. There's no, like, I don't have buttons. I don't even have to think about it. I mean, I think sometimes maybe it doesn't know how to operate it itself, maybe exactly right or whatever. But I mean, but who's to know about that? Concerning intelligence, brothers, many years ago, I had this sense that like that I had a something to share, that I had something to offer. And I began over many years, I began to kind of, and I was told on a number of occasions that what I have to offer is not quite welcome here. You know, that the way that I ask questions, the way I show up musically is not, um, you know, even though I'm studied, even though I know, I understand scales, but that's not quite what that's, in fact, you're threatening us. You know, like, I began to understand after a while that kind of the way that I'm showing up is threatening, to some people, that my intelligence maybe isn't quite welcome here. I have a great respect for what we're calling intelligence, and I think that, you know, like, I love the human story. I love the way, like, I like to imagine us just kind of all waking up together. I have so many teachers, and you guys are my teachers. And what's happening here today, you know, as we're like washing our tubers, you know, I mean, as we're just a big, you know, like, it's I must believe that this is happening everywhere right now. We're you know, we have a message, and for myself, the way I describe that, it whatever it is that I share with people, it's got to be in love.
I agree.
And that doesn't mean that I'm always a nice guy either. Like, I'm generous, I'm compassionate, I'm nurturing, I'm kind, but that doesn't mean that I have to be nice, because sometimes I have to be confrontational, and sometimes there's an intelligence in the boundaries that I maintain. And unless I'm capable of giving freely to each of you in this conversation without depending on you to validate me in a moment, then I can't really be with you. And I think something's happened in each of us through the course of what we might call recovery, seeing that we met in this 12-step program, which is a program to bring us out of some kind of delusion or illusion or some kind of deception that we're playing. It's to help us get honest with ourselves. I really believe in what we're doing as this is like a this is a form of intelligence, this thing that we're doing right now. And I just want to honor you guys, and I want to honor God and Ricky right now, you know, for teaching me how to, in that one night, teaching. He got me a gig that night. He was like, "Man, you really play. You want to play down at the Commodore?" And so in Wellington, Kansas, we went into the Commodore bar right there on Main Street, and he was like, "Hey, let this guy play." And man, I played, and we played together. And so, and that's how I learned. How I learn is through is being with you guys, talking with you. This is how I'm an emotional learner. I learn through, like you said earlier, through connection, Michael.
Yeah. Yeah. It is the beginning of greater understanding. Right. And, you know, we sort of have this idea that intelligence is something to be absorbed, you know, or even discovered, right? But what I see intelligence as is an expression, right? When I plant a seed and I see that seed sprout, and I see that sprout become a plant, and then I see that plant drop a seed, this is the expression of infinite intelligence. And I mean all powerful, never ending,
Woo!
you know, completely perfect symmetry, expression of divine intelligence. It's not something that the plant reads about, you know, it's not something that the plant learns from its mom, you know, it's not something that the plant absorbs. It's
Yeah,
something that is expressed in the plant itself, in the being of the plant. You know,
yeah,
the plant's desire to live is this
yeah.
intelligence. And so that's what we're tapping back into. We're tapping back into the expression of intelligence. And even if we want to call that knowledge, that's fine.
Mhm.
But what we're getting away from is the concept that we are to receive this knowledge from outside sources, that we are to be, somehow enhanced and become better people because we
Ah,
received this from some outside source.
huh.
That is not the truth, and it's not the reality.
I
The
like.
reality is that all of this intelligence would be expressing if it weren't for our fears, which were imposed
Oh,
on us.
yes, brother.
Wow.
Yes.
And so, intelligence is already existing. When a new student joins us, or when I join this meeting, or anything like that, the respect, right, the ability to see that person for what they really are, is founded on this understanding that when I see you, I am looking at divine intelligence in action, in reality, in expression from nature itself. Now, if you want to, change my mind with all your ideas, then we'll go that route. But when I see you, I have to be able to see that in you first.
I'm learning to photosynthesize. I'm growing some chloroplasts.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm trying. I'm gonna change. I'm gonna turn some light into carbohydrates, dude.
Yes,
That's it.
yes, into expendable energy, right?
I mean, like I know how to photosynthesize. That's I sat with some trees in these
Mhm.
couple of years, and I've just really like been like, damn, that's smart, you know?
And we call it chlorophyll in plants, and we call it melanin in human beings.
Mm,
It's the same process. It is only this intelligence that is expressing itself through nature, which is adaptation. This what do they call it? The savage jungle of nature. Yeah.
mm.
Wow.
All right, my friends, this has been an amazing maiden voyage. Is there anything else we need to cover before we say goodbye today?
I would just say, man, just to put a cap on this idea of, where are we getting our information from, right? Is when it comes to decentralizing this neural network of humanity, what we're really looking for is a system. And the system that we want to uh, utilize is different from what we're utilizing now, in the sense that right now we have systems that we uh, believe, right or wrong, that we can trust.
Okay, so we're not anti-system then. But we are creating a new, the next iteration of system, which will possibly even one day be institutionalized, and we'll need to there'll be need to be another system created. And exploring the idea of you said system, so I'm exploring that word.
Right. And the difference between a centralized system and a decentralized system
Since D
is
system, okay.
is this concept of trust, right? Because we live in a centralized system, we are forced to trust certain entities, whether they be corporations, people, institutions, ideas, even doesn't matter. In a decentralized system where all information is freely shared and available, there is a trustless environment where I don't have to trust you. I don't have to trust the person that built the system. I trust the system because the system can't be changed. It can't be arbitrarily, altered to benefit one or a few people. And
Mm.
so that's the real concept of decentralization. It is what nature operates as, right? I, as an individual, have access to all information in this network of reality. Whether or not I choose to deploy that information is up to me, or which, pieces of information I choose to publish and to accept and to make part of my own personal system, that's up to me. But if we could all agree on something that we can trust, which is, intelligence itself,
Right.
then we can develop a system that is truly trustless.
I have these lyrics to this song in my head. They say most shark attacks happen in about 3 feet of water. That's not what I told my daughter. When she asked about the questions, when she asked, yes, that I this song came to me in San Diego. It's about moving out beyond the tidal pool, and like I have this duty, this responsibility to move out, and this is anyway. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful you're talking about this decentralized, because that's kind of where we started, right? Was like this idea of this decentralized forum, and
Right.
this is kind of where humanity is. There's this decentralized technology coming into existence, and that's where we've got to go, right? And there are there are always going to be dangers as we try to employ new technology. There are risks. There are risks in getting together. In the line of work that I've been doing for quite some time, kind of as I've been letting, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. As I've been letting my light shine, I've had some people question me, like, are you trying to be some kind of know-it-all guru? And my answer to that is no. Together, we're discovering our common work. Together, we're discovering our common stories. Together, we're discovering our common love. And so this is, we're not saying we have the corner on intelligence. We're not saying this is it. Buy this from us. In fact, we're saying we're freely sharing with you what has been freely given to us, right? And so somehow that's the new capital, like you've been saying recently.
The authenticity that makes us authentic.
Right. That's right. And it is what furthers things. It is evolution, right? When we as a humanity just sort of stop coming up with new ideas, evolution stops.
Yeah.
And that's where we are. They like it this way because we're predictable in this state. We're predictable in this environment of experts surrounding us and keeping us from pushing the boundaries of these industries. It's why, when blockchain and these types of technologies come out, it completely revolutionizes the world. And it's not like people are coming up with new ideas. These ideas exist in nature. Like I said, the world is decentralized. It's only our
Right.
system that's centralized, so
Yes, we're discovering that this is like we're not separate. We're not separate like we've made ourselves out to be. We've created centralized systems, and we've proven over time that anytime we centralize a system, it's a pyramid scheme, right? It's a Ponzi scheme. Our
all it is.
systems are what's really they're destroying us now. And like in the biblically speaking, it's when the people said, when God was like, "Hey, you don't need a king, trust me." And
Yes.
we're saying, oh, we need a king, we need a king, so we get Saul, right?
Right.
Also where the heart of David comes in. But so we're managing, we're working, it's coming to this place where it is about transcending those kingships and becoming, I am that great I am, and so are you, right? And we are not separate from God. We are that one. And this is
Yeah.
where that we the people is really kind of like the we the people ideology, kind of we created. We come to trust centralized systems, right? Federal systems, and some of us know the violence. It's a true violence. Even if you're not shedding blood, there's a violence. It's a the crushing nature of the centralized systems, and they cannot care for us, right? These centralized systems cannot be our daddy. They cannot care for us, and we have to learn to care for one another. And that's why Authentic Intelligence University, right? We're creating a system here, a decentralized system, a system where we're coming. And today, this is the system, and part of it is like the system being able to work with novelty. Like, well, what if other, 4 or 5 other people are here? How does that system work then? But we've also seen in those 12-step rooms that even people who have grave emotional and mental disorders, can come together around around a principled system and have creative healing, helpful, recovering conversations, right? And that's kind of where we all started together. Dan, I just want to acknowledge you in the midst of that, because like both Michael and I just benefited so greatly from your dedication to those principles, right? Not your dedication to blind dedication to a pre-established system, but you in the conservative realm, you said these principles saved my life. Right now, I'm freely sharing with you the value of these principles, because you noticed in both of us our authentic intelligence, and I think that's what you've been blessing in both Michael and I. Is like, hey, as that diagnostician that's outside the system, you're assessing intelligence, and you're saying, hey, I see the light in you, brothers, and I know that me and Michael have both benefited greatly from your capacity. I mean, you're bringing us together today. Without you, we're not here.
Well, and then what's so beautiful about this is how intergenerational this whole process is, because it was Michael's grandfather who held form and was there to pass down these principles. And
Right.
to kind of go back to what Michael's already shared with us, and if you don't mind ending on a note like this, Travis and Michael, we were talking, and I'll let Michael take over here. But we were talking about passing this on to our children, and then so you know what I'm talking about, Michael.
Dude. Yeah. We have to view intelligence as expression, and we have to view the expression as the authenticity, right? When I meet, what I say is that real recognizes real. I consider myself a real person, and when I come around real people, I recognize them immediately. Real also recognizes fake. So when I come around people who aren't being authentic, I can recognize that immediately. But fake can't recognize either, right? A fake person doesn't know if the other person is being authentic or not. And so they're operating in a world that I don't want to exist in. I want to operate in a world that is about the expression of the creator, you know, and that when I see people being authentic, it's not because they're passive or weak. It's because they are expressive. This is the person in the meeting that's laughing and nobody knows why. Because they are expressing intelligence. They are authentically intelligent in that moment. And they don't need anything to validate what they're experiencing to know that it's true. They're just in that intelligence. And so, I guess that's what I really want to say is that, this what we've done is we've imparted value to knowledge. And we've said that knowledge is your accumulation of knowledge determines your wealth, your value. And what we have is a bunch of people who are full of knowledge and expressing no intelligence. So we
Right.
have, like I mentioned the other day, we have industries where just to make paper, we tear down whole forests,
Wow.
which is the great application of knowledge and how to make paper, but it expresses no intelligence, considering like the seventh generation, let's say. The plant that is growing with authentic intelligence and expressing itself naturally doesn't have to consider the seventh generation. It's part of the data. It's part of the intelligence that it is expressing. It would never do anything that would harm the seventh generation or even impede it. So, authenticity is the expression of intelligence.
Wow. Wow.
Would you agree with that?
It sounds good to me. Authenticity is the expression of intelligence. Did we lose Travis?
Oh, yeah.
He left.
Just something
All
like
right.
that happened.
All right, bud.
Man,
Hey,
this was
great
cool.
to see you, man. You look great.
You too, Dan. We'll talk again, man.
All right, we will, man. I'm
Love you,
excited.
bro. All right, man.
Love you,
Bye-bye.
man. Bye.